hello everybody. This is episode 2 of the Midnight Burial podcast. This is Robert Marujo, your host, the editor-in-chief of NintenDojo.com, the editor-in-chief of Bits and Bytes, and a man who is currently having a little trouble breathing. You might have noticed in the previous episode some kind of gulping, gasping noises coming from me, and you're going to hear them again today. I can't help it. I don't know what's going on. Past few weeks I've been having issues with this. Went to see the doctor, trying to figure it out. So if I'm a little breathy, that's why. I apologize. It's annoying. All right, so it is almost 1 a.m. on Thanksgiving Day, where I am recording. If you are not from the U.S. listening to this, Thanksgiving is a fantastic holiday that you appreciate more as you get older because you just sit and eat. You don't have to buy any gifts. You don't have to do anything. You just show up for food. It's fabulous. And I'm looking forward to meeting with the rest of my family later today. But in the meantime, let's talk about some of the crazy shenanigans going on in the world of video games and comic books. I think first up, I would like to talk about Matt Hansen, the art director at Obsidian, who is working on Avowed, the company's upcoming RPG scheduled for a release in February of 2025. He has managed to incur the wrath of Elon Musk. Now, this all kind of dates back to some posts that Musk had made on X a little while ago talking about preferred pronouns in fantasy games, something that Musk is not a fan of. Frankly, a lot of gamers don't seem to be a fan of this sort of modern day influence in their games, but particularly in games that are supposed to be set in the past or a setting that is fantastical in nature, dark fantasy being one of them. So Musk doesn't like it. A lot of people don't like it, but Hansen doesn't like that Musk doesn't like it, and so he's been kind of picking on him via his Blue Sky account. And this has kind of reached a boiling point with Musk alleging on X that Hansen is engaging in illegal hiring practices. Now, this can be traced to Hansen's own social media posts. Now, I'm not saying he's guilty of anything. I'm just saying this is what people are pointing out. Hansen has made comments like this: "We got too many crusty white dudes in this field. Please let me help you replace me one day. I want to go back to living in the woods." So I think anybody who is too jacked into social media is aware of this kind of stuff coming from the development community. And it's not just game devs. I mean, this is comic book creators. This is Hollywood actors. This is a kind of popular stance to take, which is, I mean, there's really no other way to put it. It's an anti-white stance. Anti-white, anti-male, anti-heteronormative is what it all kind of gets blanketed under. And people like Hansen are, all too eager to go online and discuss this and say these sorts of things. But Hansen's posts, at least according to Musk and a couple others online, are pointing towards potentially illegal hiring practices that are based on discriminatory things like race. So that's a problem. And Musk went onto his X account and he added the CEO of Microsoft, who is, I'm going to butcher his name, I think it's Satya Nadella, something like that, saying this is illegal. Straight up tells him that this is not okay. And Musk goes on, he has commented on somebody else's post saying that for Hansen, apparently Hansen, that it's not going to end well for him to be doing this. Now, it's unfortunate, but there's a lot of people who are emboldened to make these kind of statements online. It's nothing new. It's been going on for years. Again, comic books is a big one. A lot of comic book creators have been saying stuff like this, and you can kind of trace it back to the activism and the activists that have taken root in all these industries. I think that the nexus for this kind of stuff, it goes back to the 90s, when companies are starting to digitize for the first time. And I'm not talking about like their billing practices. It's like all of a sudden these old people that are running these companies, these older people, I should say, are being told, hey, we have to get one of these website things. Well, what the hell's a website? Well, it's a www.com. And so, these people running, everything from like PG&E to the New York Times are suddenly having to deal with this new technology. New technology tends to mean bringing in younger people. They grasp it more easily. They can adapt to it better. And then they're able in turn to filter it to these older workers who, begin to understand it and use it. But the impetus comes from the youth. And so what's happened is in the time since we've seen that process kind of go underway, you have the advent of social media. So the hiring, you skew to these younger people, and what happens is they hire more of themselves, right? Once you let one in, they start to hire similar people. And that's true of, the activist crowd. So it's through that younger portal that leads to the activist type that's been hired. And then the activist type is only going to hire other activists, and they're people who think like them. And what's unfortunate is that these people mean well. I don't think Hansen is like this nefarious figure. But I do think that the problem is that for people like Hansen, it's a lot easier for them to just shut off debate, because in their heads, they just think, I'm right. What I'm saying is right. You are that phrase, right? You're on the wrong side of history. That's what it means. It's like they don't think that there's anything to debate, because to them, it's very black and white. They're fighting the bad guys. They're fighting the World War II villains, as they like to call them. And so because of that, it makes them feel, a sense of power, a sense of justice to go online. And essentially just they're pointing at anyone and everyone who they think doesn't think like them, or who doesn't parrot the same sort of narrative that they push. Those people are ists. Those people are phobes. I've used that phrase in the first episode. I'm probably going to use it every episode that I come on here and talk. Because it's such a hot button issue. This idea that everyone that doesn't agree with you is some kind of far-right bigot. And, I think I made it clear earlier when I'm talking about the preferred pronouns in Avowed. You're making a dark fantasy game. People have expectations for what a dark fantasy game is going to be like, including the content in it, and preferred pronouns just don't seem to jive with that. Now, as I mentioned again, episode 1, be sure to go listen. There's nothing wrong with including that sort of thing. Now, whether you believe in it or not, or agree with it, or think it's appropriate, that's its own thing. I'm just saying that this is America. You have the right to make whatever you want. If you want to make a dark fantasy game and have preferred pronouns in it, I'm sure there are players who are interested in that, and you can cater to them. But I think the problem is that game devs just continue to not understand you're making product. It's art, but it's also mass-produced product. You are selling this to people. And unless you are specifically targeting one group, one demographic, when it comes to stuff like games, you're trying to get as many people as you can to come and play. And so if you are targeting one particular political view or lifestyle view by saying, our game has modern day isms and it has things like preferred pronouns, you're probably going to be turning off that other chunk of the audience that isn't interested in it. And when you are dealing with people who are, in this current world we live in, people who perceive themselves as activists or think that they're allies, that's another popular term that gets used, they think that they're right. So they don't think that there's any merit to like what I'm saying right now. That what I'm saying is it's just bigoted. It's exclusionary. It's all these other things. It's like, no, you are losing sight of the fact that it's not even that this country is about left and right. I would argue the United States is largely, overwhelmingly center, and that the average person leans left and right, and it's not even consistent across the board on what issues they lean left and right about. So, it might rub people the wrong way to hear this, but the average person probably looks at something as preferred pronouns, doesn't necessarily think that, oh, that's a left-leaning issue. A lot of people would argue that's like a far-left issue. These identity politics and what they mean. You might see a lot of it on Reddit, and you might get a bunch of people to give you likes on X because you said something that they agree with. But 10,000 likes on X doesn't mean a damn thing in the real world. It's like the people petitioning for the Acolyte. I think I heard somewhere that there's like a billboard in Manhattan calling on Disney to renew the show. News alert, my friends. Even if 2 million of you signed a petition, how big is this country? We're over 300 million people. And if you look at what constitutes a successful television show, 2 million is nothing, especially for a production that costs as much money as something like The Acolyte did. So it's this strange tunnel vision that some people have where they think, well, I got 10,000 likes on X. That must mean everybody agrees with me. No, that means 10,000 people, and a lot of them are probably bots, agree with you. That doesn't necessarily translate to the real world. If you go talk to just somebody on the street, not in California, I know some people think that our major coastal areas represent the majority of the country. They don't. Go somewhere not like that and mention something along the lines of preferred pronouns. They're not going to know what the hell you're talking about. So when you present these ideas in games, and especially when it's coming from a major studio, it's Obsidian, you're going to get resistance to it. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it. I'm not trying to quantify right or wrong. I'm just telling you that's the reality. And these devs don't seem to get it. Or they have marching orders to force it. I don't really know what it is. It's one or the other. But that's what they've been trying to do. And so we've seen rejection of these sorts of concepts, and it's all over the place. There's a lot of these games that have failed. Concord failed. Dragon Age Veilguard failed. Suicide Squad Justice League, Kill the Justice League, similar problems. And I'm not saying preferred pronouns, I'm just saying the modern day isms. These either themes in storytelling, concepts, etc., that come from the now, that come from one political leaning. It's just not jiving. And when you want to sell to as many people as possible, you got to make it click. And it's not clicking. And what is just, it seems to be escaping people, or they just don't care, is that means your job's on the line. This notion that you're just going to forever be able to keep on pushing your viewpoint and telling the audience to go F itself, how is that supposed to work? There is no modern audience. That is just a myth at this point. It has been proven time and time again that there is nothing but the audience. The same old audience that you've always had. And when you have people, whether it's actors or creators or whatever, going out and trying to insist that they're appealing to this new group, or that they're trying to appeal to the audience in a new way, it's like, who are you fooling here? These are the same people you've always had. The difference is that social media is amplifying some groups louder than others. But, I mean, think about it. If you're the jacked-in activist, and you're the social media marketing manager at a company, you're a developer at a video game studio, and on, You're jacked in. You're in your algorithm. Your algorithm affirms your worldview. So you log onto X and you think the modern audience, which is your buddies who lean the same direction as you, you're using all that to justify the decisions that you're making. When in reality, you are a much smaller chunk of the freaking world. Not even just America. The world. And it's not setting in. And thus, it's created this very unhealthy paradigm of everyone else is a bad guy. Everyone else is a villain. Everyone else is an ist. Everyone else is a phobe. And you're just going to keep having failures. You're going to have stuff like Veilguard and Concord and Suicide Squad where they just land flat on their face because people are tired of it. And, you know, like I said, you can make these types of games, and someone's going to make one of these games and they're going to click. And we've had games that deal with issues that are more contemporary, appeal to a quote-unquote niche audience. Take the Life is Strange games. You know, I'm sure somebody could argue that those are woke or whatever, but they have an audience. They've made multiple of them. It comes down to many factors, but having somebody like Hansen coming out and just bawling out all these people and acting like, yeah, this is cool because, you know, my Blue Sky followers like it. I just don't understand. I mean, I don't know how Microsoft doesn't deal with this. I mean, you have to, right? The game's coming out in February. That's not that far from now. I've seen people on social media who are canceling pre-orders because of this. I saw a guy cancel. It was it was like $95. It was almost $100 for the edition of the game that he just said, F it, I'm not going to pick that up at launch anymore. I mean, is that $100 Obsidian just doesn't want? Because Hansen doesn't like certain people's political views? I don't know. I don't think that's very wise. I don't think any business should probably be doing that. But, you know, we'll see what happens. But it's not looking good. It's for, you know, Avowed and I don't know. You know, these hiring practices, like I said, you're seeing it other places and there's people who are very, very vocal about it. And I get the sense that this administration that's coming in is probably going to start going after businesses that are doing this. So it might be wise to find a better way than to just come out and say you hate white guys and you're not going to hire them. So. All right, I'm going to take a drink here real quick. All right, so next up on the docket, Sony is allegedly planning on wiggling its way into the handheld market with a new portable PlayStation. So you might recall the PlayStation Portable, or PSP as it was known. And then there was PlayStation Vita, which came after and was not quite as successful. And that's the last shot Sony has taken at a handheld. They discontinued it in 2019. There's a few things there. I mean, I think people forget that when Wii U came out, Nintendo's follow-up to Wii, that was not guaranteed to be a failure. In fact, if anything, everybody was looking at it and thinking, okay, well, Wii was huge. This is probably going to be huge too. And what did it have? It had that big old tablet controller. So you had the traditional buttons and everything on the sides, but then the big screen in the middle. Well, Microsoft and Sony paid attention to that. You might not recall, but there were the second screen experiences. The Vita was the second screen experience for the PlayStation 4. Microsoft, I think, was doing something with like Glass or something like that. They had like a tablet-based thing. Because they were like basically trying to be ready to mimic whatever Nintendo was going to do if it was again the market leader. That didn't pan out. But Vita had other problems. You know, it just did not have quite as many games, especially in comparison to what Nintendo was doing with the 3DS. It was a similar setup where Vita was more powerful. You know, Sony did make some changes this time around. It had the twin stick control setup. It had the touchscreen on the front. And then the touch pad on the back, which was an interesting idea. Tearaway used it in interesting ways. But it just didn't catch on, and ultimately Sony gave up on it. And then once Wii U failed, Microsoft and PlayStation were just like, we don't care about that second screen stuff anymore. Nintendo certainly doesn't seem to care about it either. Switch has a touch screen, but unlike the gamepad for the Wii U, you have to have the Switch docked. So it's like, even though there is the touch screen there, you can't use it during gameplay while it's on your TV. So anyway, that said, Switch is a hybrid console, both home and portable, and it's hugely successful. Let's do some quick Googling, and let's see, lifetime sales of Nintendo Switch. It's at 146 million. Now, headlines were coming out today how PS2 is at 160 million. I mean, I feel like they could push another 14 million Switch units before all is said and done and catch up. But my point is, Switch is up there. And this is following, and I've said this on other podcasts, on the 7 Minutes podcast. I've said this on Nintendo Joe, and I've probably said it on Bits and Bytes at this point. But video game journalists have been telling us since PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 that the video game console's going out the door. Those were the last consoles, according to some people. Then PlayStation 4 came out. Same thing. Then PlayStation 5 comes out, and you have the Xbox Series, and you have the Switch. It's always, it's the end, it's the end, it's the end, because we have these Omni devices on the way, like the iPhone. It does everything, including gaming. Nobody's going to want... It's like, okay, you're just wrong. It's not happening. Now, I might be wrong. We might actually be getting closer to that than we were back, in the 360 days. PlayStation 6 might be the end of the line. I don't know. I don't really think so, though. And Switch has shown that there is viability for dedicated gaming platforms. But also that people like handhelds. There's a reason Nintendo dominated for so long in the handheld market. Even when the PSP initially came out, everybody looked at that system and was like, PSP is going to be number one. Switch is... not Switch. The DS was clunky looking by comparison, did not have as good of graphics, and the concept of the two screens and the touch screen was just kind of unproven at that point. Whereas the PSP was super slick, has the giant screen, the vibrant graphics, felt like more traditional, I guess, but just more powerful as well. Didn't matter. The games are what mattered. And Nintendo innovated and just, PlayStation Portable definitely made an impact. I loved my PSP, but DS was on top, and Nintendo has ruled the handheld market. There have always been little blips here and there of competitors, sometimes with hardware just as good, if not better. Look at the Neo Geo Pocket Color. I mean, that's a great little handheld that never took off. And Vita was also a great handheld. I really loved that console. But unfortunately, Nintendo's just always dominated in that regard. So to take their handheld market, mix it with their console market, was just brilliant for them, and it's worked out ever since. Now, will we ever just see a dedicated Nintendo handheld device? I don't know. Because if this rumor's true, Sony's working on a handheld, but it's unclear what that means. Does that mean PS6 is going to be like a Switch? It's half and half. It can be plugged in at home. It can play on the go. Is it just a dedicated handheld device? No one knows yet. But my gut tells me it might be something along the lines of like, man, which one is it? Let me, more Googling, everyone, more Googling. Let's see, so the portable Xbox handheld, what is it, the ROG, I think? Yes, that's the first one that came up. So you can buy a Steam Deck, and that's going to play Steam games, and you can play some Xbox games on there, but the ROG, by all intents and purposes, is the closest to like just a portable Xbox as you're going to get. But it's playing Xbox games. It's not playing like handheld games made by Xbox. Again, think of the difference between a Wii and a DS. Wii is the home games, the home console games. DS are your handheld games. They're two separate things entirely. I don't really imagine Sony wants to do that, especially in this day and age. Everything's super expensive. Everything's more of a risk. Having two platforms where you're having to basically service both of those crowds, and it's not with the same games, I think that is something they probably don't want. So I imagine whatever portable they come up with will be able to play PS5 and or PS6 games on the go. Because it's just so enticing. Why not? I mean, Nintendo... So this is another game journalist thing, right? Nintendo's doing its own thing. No, they're making video games. They're making games. It does not matter if they're not as powerful as Xbox and PlayStation. Nobody cares. We dominated that era. It dominated the PS3, Xbox 360 era. It was on top. Fell off during the Wii U and climbed right back with Switch. And like do you think that Sony and Microsoft consider themselves to be completely separate from Nintendo? And I'm talking like internally, because I think they've said little things here and there. But the reality is, they see Nintendo. They're all making video games. They all want to appeal to young adults, kids, older people. They want it all. Okay, that's why, when Wii was in its own bubble, right, doing its own thing, yet we still wind up with PlayStation Move. We still wind up with Xbox with Kinect. Yeah, that's because they're doing their own thing, right? Yeah, BS, okay? That's a bunch of crap. So I think that Microsoft and Sony are absolutely looking at Switch and saying, well, how do we get some of that? Because this thing's doing gangbusters. And I mean, Xbox has like practically fallen off a cliff. It's like half the numbers of PlayStation 5. And even though PlayStation 5 has been selling well, Sony's not satisfied. You know, it's not what they want it to be. So their decision here is, well, let's mimic Nintendo. Let's get another portable going. I would be all for it, because I would love, I'm going to be there day one no matter what. Portable PlayStation, you are mine. But I think, can you imagine how great it would be to once again be able to have that whole library of PSP and PS Vita games on this device? Now, the Vita games might be tricky because the games with the rear touchpad, and I imagine Sony's not going to put that in whatever they're going to make. I could be wrong. But still, to be able to get the bulk of those libraries and have it combined with whatever PS5 and PS6 games, like, it could just be great. I would love to see Sony do this. Will they? I don't know. But I would like it. So that was an interesting bit of news that came out. Now, transitioning over to comic books, Dan Slott is rumored to be writing Superman in 2025. So Slotto Blocktavius, the notoriously late writer, always behind, Christos Gage comes in, helps him out. He is allegedly going to be moving over to DC and doing some Superman stuff. Now, what does that mean? I don't know. Superman right now is being written by Joshua Williamson, and by all accounts, it's not bad. It's not spectacular either, but that's kind of the state of the industry as a whole. But Williamson, he's been doing some okay things with Superman. One moment, take another drink. However, this just reeks of Bendis. Bendis is coming. Oh, those terrible words that so many DC fans hate now in retrospect. I was not very optimistic even back then when I heard Bendis was going to DC Comics. Now, I will caveat this with, I absolutely loved Bendis right up to his X-Men work. Maybe a little further back. I mentioned last time I stopped reading New Avengers when the Heroic Age kicked off. Everything up to the Heroic Age, though, I was really digging Bendis. You know, his New Avengers run, his Ultimate Spider-Man run, his Daredevil run. That stuff was so great. And then you had other little things in between here and there. The man was on fire. He was a commodity, and he was able to do so much work all at once. Well, by the time you get to X-Men, he's fallen off. He's just not what he was before. I don't know what it was. Stretched too thin. Just a complete change in worldview. I don't know. But Bendis just stopped being the Bendis that I enjoyed. And X-Men kind of sucked. So when they said, oh, he's coming over to DC, I'm like, oh, you want Bendis? I don't know if I want Bendis. I felt this way when the Giants got Barry Zito from the A's. Like, by the time Zito went to the A's, I was like, I want Zito to stay, and I hate the Giants, but I feel like Zito's not quite got it anymore. Now, yes, I know there's some Giants fans who be, we won the World Series because Zito did it. Yes. Anybody can get on fire at any point, okay? The worst team in Major League Baseball can go on a winning streak. Anyway, my point just is, Bendis went, I didn't have any confidence, and then sure enough, he completely screws Superman. That whole period is just awful. You get, like, is it Naomi who shows up, and all the DC heroes are like, you're the best ever! It's like, oh, okay, that's really gonna win over some hearts, right? So, Bendis lost it. I look at Slott as being in a slightly similar position. The difference being that Dan Slott was never the commodity that Bendis was. Now, Slott had his run on Amazing Spider-Man. Cool. You know, it was long. Not necessarily super memorable. I enjoyed Superior Spider-Man. I enjoyed bits and pieces of what he did as the writer. But for the most part, I've never been a huge fan of his work. I've always thought it was kind of overrated. It's like, yeah, I'm reading it. I'm not, like, hating it constantly. But there's times I'd get frustrated. The Parker Industries misfire. Like, that just didn't work. But regardless, he's never been huge, okay? He's never been at the level that Bendis was at his height. He's never been at the level of Mark Miller. So, if you look at his current state, he went from doing Spidey to Fantastic Four and then Iron Man. Both of those were just failures. Neither of them was very entertaining. I could not stand his Fantastic Four run. I say that as somebody who loves the Fantastic Four. I was heartbroken when they ended the book. Then Marvel 2-in-1 came out, and Chip Zdarsky was writing. And I was like, oh man, this is really good. Zdarsky was writing Ben and Johnny just fantastically, but his Doctor Doom, my God, I wish he could get another chance at writing Doctor Doom. He had the perfect voice for that character. But I was like, okay, so they're bringing the FF back. You can tell this is what this is leading to. And then it was like, oh, and Dan Slott's going to write it. I was like, oh, why can't it be Zdarsky? I want Zdarsky to write it. My instincts were proven correct because, for one thing, I freaking hate Valeria. I cannot stand that character. I was never a big fan of her when Hickman was writing her. I just think of her as a snarky asshole. I'm sorry, there's just no other way to describe her. I guess we're supposed to like her because she's a kid, a teenager, but it's like, no, I don't find these qualities endearing. These are annoying qualities that, like, people try to write off for teenagers and kids. I was like, no, this is a-hole behavior. I don't like her. And then I wasn't much more interested in Franklin either as the new teen version of the character. So that part of it sucked. But I think the final straw for me was it's a special that came out. Because the FF, when Slott took over, they had moved to Yancey Street. I don't know if I know they're not at the Baxter Building still. But they went to Yancey Street to live. And this special, which I think was by Gary Dugan or whatever his name is, was part of the story was about how the FF were seen as gentrifying Yancey Street. And I'm like, okay, hold the fucking door. Gentrifying? This is the Fantastic Four, my friends. They are the premier team of the Marvel Universe, the first family. I don't care that they're white. They have saved everyone more than you can imagine. And Ben Grimm's blood is on Yancey Street, including his brothers. They're not gentrifying anything. If anyone can call that street home, it's them. So to have that crap pushed on me as I'm reading it, I had enough. And I have not read Fantastic Four since. I read a couple issues of Ryan North's run, and it was just whatever. But I know he didn't write it, but the sentiment's there. And it just tainted that whole run. And I was like, you know what? No, I'm not reading this. I'm not going to give them my money for nonsense. So yeah, that sucked. His FF run, I was like, no thank you. The one good thing, Ben marrying Alicia. Like, you know what? Good on you, Slott. I will take that. That's a marriage that was just waiting to happen for decades now. Those two they're the only ones meant to be together. Which is funny because Peter and MJ can't be together, even though there's no other pairing that anybody wants. But Ben and Alicia can. Okay. And then his Iron Man run. First of all, Tony being adopted is stupid. It's a dumb development for the character. We end up with his mom, his real mom in the book, don't care. And then the idiocy with the AI. Where it's like, yeah, we're going to create the problem of producing super smart machines that are self-aware and have will, and create this whole, like, analogy of slavery, and on. It's an oppression narrative. I'm like, what the hell are you doing? Like, this doesn't even make any sense. You know what you do? You build your smart robot creature so that it can obey commands and do stuff, but, doesn't have an existential crisis, doesn't have a sense of independence. It's just a tool. How hard is that? It was stupid. The entire drama around it was completely manufactured and just dumb feeling. And so that was another one where I was out. I'm like, I'm not reading this. This is stupid. But I think the larger problem, and there's just no getting around it, is that Dan Slott also doesn't have the best reputation. He is antagonistic towards fans. And believe me, and I'm going to say this more than once on this show, there are absolutely pieces of garbage on social media. There are racists on X. There are phobes on YouTube. They are out there. But people like Dan Slott seem to paint with a broad brush. And sort of like this Hansen guy over at Obsidian, there's this just kind of notion of, all these people who don't agree with me are just a bunch of ists and phobes. And that's very problematic. We are your audience. We are paying customers. You're not going to agree with all of us. And if somebody's coming on and saying your work sucks, that doesn't by default mean that they are all ists and phobes. There is a guy named Sully. Oh God, I'm forgetting his first name. The Sultan of Soup on Thinking Critical on the Comics Aficionados show on Saturdays. And Sully has had a bone to pick with him for a while because he said that he had never interacted with Slott on Twitter/X before, and that he found himself blocked. And he's like, hey, I'm paying money. I've never interacted directly with this guy before. And he just has, decided to unilaterally lump me in with a bunch of people that he doesn't like because he used like a block list or something. And because Sully, is following the quote-unquote wrong people, Dan Slott just silences him as a reader and as a customer. Now, to be fair, it gets slippery, right? It's like, well, your social media is your social media. Dan Slott chooses to go on and interact with people. It's up to him who he does and doesn't want to speak to. But at the same time, it's like, well, you're very public-facing, my friend. You have lots of followers. You're using your platform to talk about your work. And your work is it art? Sure, but it's art that people pay for. It's mass-produced product. And somebody like Sully, who just gets shut up because, he follows, like, Ethan Van Sciver or something. Who knows? But that's not cool. And I don't like that kind of thing. Now, I don't find Slott as offensive as other people in the industry who have been a lot more malicious in terms of their treatment of fans, but also their treatment of other creators. So I don't have him on like a list of I'm never going to read anything he writes again. I just haven't been interested in what he writes, but I'm less incentivized to give it a shot because of the behavior that I don't appreciate. So, you know, he did his Spider-Man solo, like the adjectiveless Spidey book. They relaunched that for about 2 minutes. And it had Bagley on it. Mark Bagley was one of my favorite artists. But it was dealing with Spider-Verse stuff, and it does not click with me. I have no interest in the Spider-Verse. So I didn't want to read it. And I was less inclined to even try it because it was Slott. And then Spider-Boy comes out, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's dumb. He's like, how do I make the Sentry into something else? Oh, we'll do the Sentry, but it's Spider-Boy. No, thank you. Not interested. But now I'm hearing he's going to do Superman. So I will be fair. I'd be willing to check it out. If it turns out he's taking over Superman, or maybe he's going to be part of that Superman Superstars thing that they have going on over there on Action Comics, I might check that out too. But I don't know. I don't know if it's going to be a good fit or not. And, I mean, they might be wanting him to do something like the Superverse. That's something I heard, I think, on the Aficionados. I could see them doing that, saying, Slott, bring the multiverse, but to Superman. Do what you did with Spidey here. Or, some kind of supervillain body swap like Superior Spider-Man. I mean, it's going to be hard to have him come and not be tempted to let him do what he did on Spidey in some remixed way with Superman. Part of me thinks it'd be interesting, but part of me also just really hopes that they don't go that route. It's like, hopefully if he's coming to Superman, it's because he has something new to say. Something different to bring to the character and to the table. I also think, in some ways, I think Slott totally gets the classic take on characters. I think that he knows what Spider-Man is at its core. That if you allowed him to, he could probably churn out some really good classic style Spider-Man comics. Meaning, if you let him have the Bugle and Jonah and MJ and all that, I think Slott would do a fine job. Because of that, I think he probably gets classic Superman. I think he could do Superman in a way that everyone would like, that deals with the traditional kind of setup. I just don't know if DC is going to be willing to let him. And that kind of sucks. I would like to see, if Slott were to come on to Superman, I'd like to see him take a crack at the character in that way. But will it happen? Who knows? Who can say? We'll find out soon enough, I guess. What we did find out, however, was a little bit more about the setup for Hush 2. There was a preview that came out in, I believe it's Justice League Unlimited #1. Just a few pages. But it showed off Hush, and he's scheming, and he's soliloquying. He's doing a soliloquy. He's talking to himself. He's ranting and raving. And it was good. The art was fine. The tone is exactly how I would want it to sound. Like I really enjoy the way that Jeff Loeb writes Batman. There's a very, very particular way that he makes Bruce speak, and whether it's in his internal monologue or to other people. I enjoy it, and I'm looking forward to more of it here. I mean, we're getting bits of it too in his the last Halloween miniseries. But to have that come back after so long is going to be nice. And Jim Lee's art looks really good. My only complaint is, why does Hush have a back on his little cutouts for the characters? So first of all, he finds poses of everyone. Catwoman is standing posed. Batman is standing posed. He has these images of them that look like comic book pages. But he has them like standees. And if you look, Catwoman's facing front, And then when the position, the camera angle changes in the next shot, you can see her from behind. It's like, so Hush is making these cutouts and he's putting a backing on them too. It made me laugh. It's like, okay, that's like attention to detail, but like also a detail where it's like, would he do that? I don't think so. Anyway, so I'm sure that little snippet will appear in the collected edition of Hush 2 when it finally comes out, but I'm pretty pumped for that one. It's Batman 158. I have to tell my shop to start pulling Batman for me again. I'm reading Zdarsky's last run, and there's some kind of Gordon betrayal. Spoilers, sorry. Probably should have said that, but I won't say what the betrayal is. I just remember I'm sitting and reading it, and I'm like, oh my god. It's like, what is this crap? So we'll see how things end with Zdarsky's run, and then what it's like when Loeb takes over with Jim Lee, but that's something to look forward to. And, you know, by all intents and purposes, I mean, Marvel not as much, but DC feels like it's trying to right the ship. You have some books that people are like genuinely excited about, like Absolute Batman. Apparently Absolute Wonder Woman is good. I got to get on board that one. I forgot to have them hold that and Superman for me, so I'm a little behind on those two series. But Absolute Batman, Absolute Wonder Woman, and man, Green Lantern seems to be kicking things up a notch as well. Superman is doing okay, but like, let's say Slot comes on and it is good. And in Slot, they're giving us at least somebody who's a kind of a name. Better than not being a name, right? I think that's a positive. And then, of course, Jeff Loeb teaming with Jim Lee again for Hush 2. Now, Loeb's star had fallen off for a while, right? We all remember his Ultimates stint. That was not good. And to be fair to Jeff Loeb, I'm not sure if I said this. I don't think I mentioned this in the last episode. I might have mentioned it elsewhere. But when I look at Jeff Loeb, I always think back to the loss of his son. His son passed away from cancer. I genuinely feel like that moment in his life had a very adverse impact on his writing. It's around that time he's still working on Superman Batman, the team-up book. But towards the end of it, well, I think his DC work was fine. It's when he transitioned to Marvel, that's when you get Red Hulk. That's when you get Ultimates 3 and Ultimatum. And I remember he had said something along the lines of like wanting to write stuff that his son would have just thought was like cool or would have just enjoyed. And, you know, the things that a little kid enjoys, I mean, you know, comics, as much as I enjoy comics as an adult, and I do think they can delve into adult material, you know, I feel like comics are something that are for kids. Kids, teens, that audience should always kind of be part of the picture. So I can respect that notion on Loeb's part. But I do, you know, and I'm speaking about a man I've never met. I don't know. I've always just felt this. I feel like the trauma of that passing really had a strong impact on him, and it affected his work in a bad way. And so when Loeb was writing Hulk, you know, I didn't really think there was anything satisfying about that run other than the art. And the Ultimate stuff was just so all over the place. Like, it felt, and again, I might be wrong, but it felt like he'd never even read any of the Ultimate comic books. Like, they just let him take over and were like, well, you know, do your own thing. And it's like, oh, okay. And like the characterization was off. It's just, it was not good. The only book that really had kind of a shot in my mind was that Ultimate X book that he did with Art Adams. I mean, the art was incredible, but it was kind of interesting what they were going for. But, you know, Loeb just kind of fell off. And I feel like he, going over to Marvel TV, not really writing anything for a long time. Tim Sale passes away, his longtime collaborator. I feel like something has shifted again in Loeb. And I mean, I'm enjoying The Last Halloween. Will it end up being as good and as classic as Dark Victory and Long Halloween? That remains to be seen. We're only 2 issues, technically 3 issues in because of the 0 issue. And then, you know, we've only gotten snippets of what Hush 2 is going to be. But I'm feeling optimistic about Loeb. And so as a whole, I think maybe we're starting to see a shift in the comic book industry. I really hope so. I mean, they need it. Publishing is not doing well in the world of American comic books, so here's hoping that DC can turn it around. All right. This one is movie related. So I've said before, I'm going to talk pop culture on this show. That means movies, too. Movies and books. Not just me talking comics and games. So, Gladiator 2 is out. Spoiler warning for this, okay? I'm going to mention something from the film. And it's something that really bothers me. It's why I want to talk about it. I absolutely love the first Gladiator. One of my favorite movies of all time. I've always thought that Lucilla's relationship with Maximus it's very heartwarming, because these are two people that clearly had some emotional connection, but could never do anything about it. She was married. He was married. And it's not until basically both of their spouses have died that you get that moment where they kiss each other towards the end of the movie. And it's clear that they love each other, and it just never was able to work out. Doesn't mean they didn't love their spouses. Doesn't mean that they didn't feel fulfilled with what they had. But that moment came, and they were able to connect in a way that they weren't able to before. And that's what the movie sets up, is that there was this tension there, but that they hadn't acted on it. You get to Gladiator 2, and it turns out that Lucius, who's the main gladiator dude in this film, he actually is Maximus's son. Oh, I can't stand it. I'm like, are you serious? Like, this soils the purity of that relationship that the two of them had. And, not to sound like a Puritan, but it's like, I mean, I just look at it from the outside in. Clearly, they had to have cheated in order for Maximus to have fathered this boy. Because why else would Lucius's father have been in a position to think that's my kid? They had to have been together already. So that means he's probably cheating on his wife, and she's cheating on her husband. The whole thing's stupid. And then it's like, so Maximus doesn't seem to know Lucius is his boy. So does that mean she keeps it from him? Which is also kind of crappy. Like, it's so annoying. A pointless addition to the story that just didn't need to happen. I don't need Maximus to be Lucius's father to understand why the kid is devoted to the guy. Why he would want to follow in his kind of footsteps. It's like he already is going to worship the ground that Maximus walks on. The film ends with a gladiator killing their emperor and then giving a speech saying to carry on the dream of Marcus Aurelius, and he drops dead. That is something that would be talked about for the rest of time in Rome, in this alternate past that was created in the first Gladiator. No one would forget it. Everyone would be talking about it for the rest of their lives. That's it. I don't need more in terms of Lucius. That's going to be inspiring. I also was not particularly keen on the messaging of the dream is dead, referring to the dream of Rome. Now, I think maybe he did a little Platoon talk about this. This might have been a drinker, open bar discussion that I'm riffing on. But basically, I look at the first movie and Maximus referring to Marcus Aurelius's dream, realize it, make it happen. He wanted Rome to become a republic again. He wanted it to be led by the people and not by an emperor. Well, I see parallels in that to our own country, to the United States, and the idea of the American dream and keeping that alive. You get to Gladiator 2, and now Lucius is saying, the dream is dead, let's do something new. Which to me feels like a commentary on us, on the American dream, that it's dead, that it was never real, that it was this, that it was that. More modern day isms, more just kind of crap. That might be me reading too much into it, but it's a feeling I got, and given the state of Hollywood and the type of people who are making movies, who are these activist types, who do hate America, I don't think it's too far-fetched to think that that's what's being insinuated. So that rubbed me the wrong way and was not something I found very, very pleasing. So, poo-poo on Gladiator 2. An unnecessary sequel. All right, so a couple more things before we wrap up. I thought it was interesting that Samsung has a gaming hub that they started up. It's a new game streaming service, and if you have access to it, you can play Black Ops 6 for free. Now, I write about games. It's a big part of what I do. And so I have pretty much everything you can play on. I don't have a Steam Deck yet. I will get one eventually. But I do have, all the modern consoles. I have an Apple TV. I have a gaming PC. But I don't think I can play Samsung. I don't think I can play the Samsung Game Hub service because you need to have one of their smart TVs. And I guess maybe the phones don't work. Apparently there's a projector that you can buy that will also let you play. But it has a lineup of games. I think it's 23 games. It has some stuff that's kind of, like whatever. Monopoly Go is on there. You can play Candy Crush Saga. But they're partnered with Microsoft. Now, Samsung and Microsoft have something going on with Game Pass already. But now they're taking it to the next level and saying, hey, if you have Samsung Gaming Hub, you can just stream Black Ops 6 and start playing. I thought that was kind of interesting and worth bringing to people's attention. So if you have access to Samsung Gaming Hub, which again, it's a free service, you don't have to pay for it, allegedly, this might be worth checking out. I mean, more games is a good thing. And I mentioned in the last episode that my love of mobile gaming has been kind of reignited. And I'm dabbling more and more with it. And, I will always love physical media. And I'm always going to push physical media. We need to have games that are printed on discs, printed on cartridges. We need to have dedicated gaming devices. But that doesn't mean there isn't room for other stuff. And I think that it allows for, creators to do unique things. And, when I look at, like, the Game Boy era, for example, that older hardware with its limitations, I think, led to creations that you wouldn't have otherwise. The beautiful pixel art on Game Boy. Like, why would you even try to make anything like that when you can go, into Unreal Engine and you have all these assets that are just there and you can just download them and throw them in and you can have 3D models and on and on. And there's a lot of beautiful stuff that gets created in that way. But now if you're going to make pixel art, you have to intentionally be doing it. And if you're going to make something that looks like a Game Boy game, you're just essentially mimicking that style. You're not restricted to it trying to work within it. Shovel Knight is kind of an example of that. Shovel Knight's beautiful and it has a great 8-bit aesthetic, but it also breaks rules because it can. It's on more powerful hardware. You can have more pixels on the screen, more colors, and so on. Anyway, what I'm getting at is these mobile games, the phones keep getting more and more powerful, but for the most part, phones are not totally on par with what we're seeing on console. So you're still getting some games that are having to deal with limitations, and I love the hell out of that. I love seeing creators make stuff that doesn't quite, it's not at the same level, so you have to find workarounds to make stuff look good and make it run well. I've been experiencing this on Apple TV. I'm playing Fantasian for the first time, and Fantasian looks really cool. I think it's pre-rendered backgrounds, at least that's what it looks like. It has the feel of pre-rendered backdrops like in Resident Evil on PlayStation 1 or Final Fantasy 7. And it's just so beautiful. And then you have the more intricate character models on top of it. The turn-based mechanics. I feel like these oddball spaces like Samsung Gaming Hub or Apple Arcade, they are allowing for different things that you're not necessarily seeing everywhere else. I don't know. I might be completely full of crap. Admittedly, I am not the biggest Steam user. It's something, I'm planning to correct as time goes on. So somebody might be sitting there thinking, all of that's on Steam already. And it's like, you're probably right. But for me and my experience, I've really been enjoying dipping my toe into these ecosystems. And if I can get my hands on Samsung Gaming Hub, I will try. But in the meantime, if you can access it, I say, why not give it a shot? Go check out Call of Duty Black Ops 6. It's actually pretty good. I have been enjoying the multiplayer. But yes, something worth checking out. Is there anything else I would like to discuss with you wonderful people before switching off and turning in so I can get rest to go drive and see family tomorrow? I guess I will say, because I'm not ready to give it a review yet, I am reading the new Batman book. It's Batman Resurrection. And you know what? Wait a moment. I'm walking. You're going to hear me walking away, maybe. I'm waddling over to the book itself, which is on my bed. So, Batman Resurrection by John Jackson Miller. It's a rather large book. It's a hardcover. Let me give you the synopsis. I'm going to read it to you. The Joker is dead, but not forgotten. Gotham City is saved, but is still not safe. By night, its new symbol of hope, Batman, continues his fight to protect the innocent and the powerless. By day, his alter ego, Bruce Wayne, wonders whether there may someday be a future beyond skulking the city's rooftops, or the cavernous halls of his stately manor alongside the ever-dutiful Alfred Pennyworth. But even after his death, the Clown Prince of Crime's imprint can be seen in more than just the pavement. Remnants from the Joker's gang are leading wannabes fascinated by his bizarre mystique on a campaign of arson that threatens the city, even as it serves greedy opportunists, including millionaire Max Schreck. And survivors of exposure to the Joker's chemical weapon Smilex continue to crowd Gotham City's main hospital. To quell the chaos, Batman needs more than his cape and his well-stocked utility belt. Bruce Wayne is forced into action, prompting a partnership with a charismatic scientist to help solve the health crisis. But as he works in both the shadows and the light, Bruce finds himself drawn deeper into Gotham City's turmoil than ever before, fueling his obsession to save the city, an obsession that has already driven a wedge between him and Vicky Vale. The loyal Alfred, who had hoped Bruce's efforts as Batman could help him find closure, sees the opposite happening. Nightmares begin to prompt Bruce to ask new questions about the climactic events in the cathedral, and investigations of the arsons by Commissioner Gordon and reporter Alexander Knox only amplify his concerns. Having told the people of Gotham City that they'd earned a rest from crime, Batman finds the forces of evil growing ever more organized and orchestrated by a sinister hand behind the scenes. The world's greatest detective must solve the greatest mystery of all. Could the Joker have somehow survived? And could he still have the last laugh against the people of Gotham City? And the very back of the book says, funny thing about Jokers, there's 2 in every deck. So, it's a nice, big, beautiful hardcover. Now, buy at independent bookstores, my friends. I'm going to preach this. I preach it on Nintendojo, and I preach it here on Bits and Bytes. Try not to buy things from Amazon. Give business to others. Now, that said, I do enjoy Barnes & Noble. I will go into Barnes & Noble, and this is where I bought it. But there are other bookstores as well, and you should check them out. If you're here in the Bay Area, there are quite a few other options. Books Inc. is kind of cool, but they're a chain. They're a smaller chain. But this 413-page book, I'm sure you could find a copy if you went somewhere like Spectator Books, which is on Piedmont in Oakland. Oakland! I refuse to call Piedmont its own city. It's a lie. It's nonsense. I don't care that they have separated themselves. It's pure nonsense, my friends. Piedmont is just part of Oakland. Anyway. Spectator Books. It's not that far from Dr. Comics and Mr. Games, which is also on Piedmont. And then, what is the name of that place? I think I got rid of the receipt. Oh, what's it called? More Googling. You're going to have to wait for me. Hold on. Let's see. Bookstore, Piedmont, Ave, Oakland, CA. Man, I'm going to have to give him a shout out next time, I think. I believe it's Tally Ho. Let me try Googling that. Tally Ho. Tally Ho, Tally Ho. Yep, Tally Ho Books. Tally Ho Books was a different bookstore before that. I never went into that shop as much, but I was in there this past week. They're great. They redid the store. They still have the beautiful shelves on the walls, but they tore up the old carpet and redid the wood flooring. It's really beautiful. Totally worth checking out. And then there's Spectator Books. Buy from places like that, my friends. Buy books other than Amazon. But anyway, it seems pretty good so far. I've been reading it. I'm into the first chapter. Knox sounds like Knox if you watch 89 Batman. So this is a sequel to Batman 89. So it's the first of the, what's his face? Not Val Kilmer. Michael Keaton Batman movies by Tim Burton. Now, I know what you're thinking. Batman Returns is the sequel. Yes. I think this is addressed in an interview, but like basically this is a more direct sequel to Batman 89. Because if you watch Batman Returns, there is a clear sense of separation. It's been a while since the first movie. This one is like 6 months after the first movie. So it's much closer in proximity. It kind of gives you more detail on why Vicky Vale disappears from Bruce's life. So that'd be interesting to see. Hopefully it's not handled like in an annoying way. But yeah, it's fine so far. We'll see if it's good. This concept of either the Joker somehow having survived or someone else being the Joker, kind of interesting. I'm not sure about the Smilex part, though. I mean, Bruce solved that. Like, in the movie, him and Alfred go shopping, and then he figures out how to counter the poisons, and that's the end of it. But, I guess this is dealing with some long-term effects. So, I'm interested in all of it. It's cool. I hope it's good. I use that term, modern day isms, and I will admit the modern day isms bug me. They bug me in pretty much everything that they pop up in. I feel like it ruins a lot of stuff, kills the timelessness that you get from it. So I'm hoping no modern day isms pop up in this book, but if they do, I will undoubtedly comment on it here on the Midnight Burial. All right, time to close out. I guess maybe this will be the tradition. It's either going to be the tradition of this show, or maybe I spin off to do something else, because I really felt like talking again earlier this week, and I was like, well, I said once a week, but I might transition to doing like a second show. We'll see. This is early days. It's only episode 2. And we'll see if I even keep up with my weekly schedule. Hopefully I do. But regardless, comic books. So maybe we can try ending the show again with books that I'm reading. Now, the problem right now is where the hell did I put everything? Okay, hold on. I'm reaching to the shelf. I'm grabbing my stack. Now, I love IDW Sonic. I think it's a really good reimagining of the series. So if you are unfamiliar with Sonic lore, and what I mean by lore, not necessarily the comic book lore, I'm talking about the publishing lore. Archie Comics published Sonic forever. And Ian Flynn was the writer for a good stretch of the final chunk of time at Archie. I thought that was really fun stuff. And they expanded with original characters, and then there were the beloved Archie characters like Rotor and Princess Sally and so on. However, there was a creator who was working on Archie for a long time, and he made a bunch of the Echidna characters, so like the Knuckles branch of the Sonic world, and some others. And he won a court case with Archie where he was able to maintain the rights of the characters. And so he's like publishing, like I think he's done like some crowdfunding or something, but he has taken those characters and he's doing his own thing. Archie like had lost the agreement that they had. It was a mess. And I think Sega was not impressed. And so even though people loved the Archie books, Sega just eventually cut off Archie. It's never been clear why. I suspect it's because of what happened with that whole deal. And so IDW took over. Now, IDW has its problems, but for the most part, I think they've been doing a fine job with Sonic. Admittedly, I'm not, like, completely up to date with the story. The problem is I was having my shop pull Sonic monthly, and then they just arbitrarily stopped, and I was not going in regularly and just gave up. I was like, well, whatever. I guess I won't get Sonic anymore. So I've been buying the beautiful Ultimate Editions, the fantastic hardcovers that they sell. And the hardcovers collect, I think it's like 2 volumes? It's 2 to 3 volumes of the mainline series per collection. Maybe not 3. It's probably closer to 2. I'll let you know next episode. But that's how I've been maintaining the Sonic story. So I'm liking it so far. However, I'm going to start collecting it monthly again. I'm going to try to get up to speed quickly so that I know where they're at. Issue 75 is approaching, by the way. So if you want a milestone issue, get your hands on issue 75. But I picked up Sonic the Hedgehog Fang the Hunter. And this seems like just a fun little mini-series with Fang going after the 8th Chaos Emerald. It is written by Ian Flynn, with pencils by Mauro Fonseca and Thomas Roethlisberger. And the art's really good. Particularly the coloring. Very good stuff. Can't wait to read this, so that's on my radar right now. Also, the 30th anniversary one-shot special for Knuckles is out. So they did Sonic, they did Tails, they did Amy, and now it's Knuckles' turn. Now, I have 2 covers. I could not resist. I am very critical of variant covers. I can't stand them. I never engage, with rare exception. And this was one of the rare exceptions. I got the main cover, but I also got the B cover. Now, cover A was done by Aaron Hammerstrom, and it's fine. It's a nice-looking cover. But cover B was by Mark Hughes. And, oh, this is just so cool-looking. It looks like a Genesis game. I couldn't resist. So, unfortunately, though, I haven't gotten a chance to sit and read it. I've just been very busy. But I was very excited to see this on shelves, and so I grabbed it. Another couple comics to discuss. You know, in terms of good, I'm so torn on Nightwatcher. This is a TMNT spin-off series. This is the Jenica book. So, man, you know, see, I gotta figure this out, guys. Do a deep dive on comics. This is supposed to be the end of the show. I'll try not to take too much longer. But I do want to talk TMNT a little bit. The relaunch is pretty good so far. Now, Jason Aaron does some really stupid shit in his books, and it annoys me, including what he did with The Punisher. Like, that's just sacrilege. But at least 3 issues in, his TMNT is fine. I'm enjoying it. But then you have other ancillary series that are going on. So there's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Nightwatcher, and then there's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Nation, okay? And if you look on the cover, you can see they've very creatively done the lettering so that it says mutation all in the same color. Anyway, so Mutant Nation has a Casey Jones story in it, and then it has a Raphael story. Now, that one I'm still catching up on, but I have read the first 3 issues of Nightwatcher. I'm not big on Jenica in general. Unfortunately, she just has the really bad, you know, fan fiction-esque world building that went on around her. I don't know what Sophie Campbell was thinking. I felt like Jenica could have potential. Jenica wasn't just some out-of-nowhere character. I'm sure people who don't know the IDW Turtles just thought it was this arbitrary new turtle. Jenica had history with the team. But then it turns into this whole, again, it's like furry fan fiction. That's the only way I can describe it. That's what it feels like to me. It's furry fan fiction. So Jenica getting her own series, I'm like, I guess. And it's Mutant Town. I guess my problem with Nightwatcher is that it's trying to draw allegories, connections between being a minority and being a mutant. But the problem is that mutants you would legitimately have concerns and questions about. These are people that were exposed to some kind of strange chemical compound in the middle of New York City. You got like giant rhinoceros people walking around, somebody that looks like a leopard, whatever. Yeah, this is going to be concerning. This is going to be something to worry about. But it's making these just terrible, parallels with like immigrants. And I'm like, that's not what this is. And it's insulting as a minority that you're trying to equate the mutants in that way. There's other ways that you could be doing it, and they're not. So that kind of bugs me. And then, like, this issue has this really ham-fisted character who murders a guy, but, like, you're supposed to feel sorry for her because, well, she's homeless and had no choice, and people are mean to her because she's a mutant. It's like, okay, I get what you're trying to do, but it's in the most Reddit possible way of writing it. Reddit meaning the social media site. I'm going to talk a lot of shit about Reddit on this podcast because I feel like there's a lot of psychos on there. A lot of psychos with a lot of activist talk. And the activist view on this topic just doesn't work because it makes it hard to sympathize with the character. It's that refusal to see outside of a certain bubble where it's just like, well, she murdered a guy, but it's the same mentality where you're reading X-Men Green and the character kills the store owner because his plastic bag killed a turtle. It's like, no, I'm sorry, I don't feel sympathetic. Not for that action. I can sympathize with being angry, seeing a sea turtle or a turtle killed by a plastic bag. That does bother me, but to reach the conclusions that some of these people do, I just don't like. I don't agree with it, and I think it's wrong in many cases. And also inappropriate in cases as well. X-Men shouldn't have that kind of messaging in it as far as I'm concerned. And so Night Watcher had a little bit of that going on in issue 3, but I do think the art is competently done. And this version of Night Watcher, if you saw TMNT, the CGI movie from back in the day, in the early 2000s, Jenica's in that armor, basically. But it's not Raphael, it's her. The artwork is by Pharaoh P. And I believe Pharaoh's been working since issue 1. But yeah, it's pretty decent stuff. It has kind of a watercolor, not a watercolor, an ink wash sort of look in places. And it's done pretty well. I think the comic's interesting so far. I'm 3 issues in. I'm willing to give it a little more time. But I think part of the problem is that it's a Jenica book, but I don't feel like we've gotten a lot of, like, Jenica, if that makes any sense. She seems to be getting influenced by the armor, but, like, there's minimal interaction with Jenica and her world. Now, I say that as somebody who's complained about Mutant Town. We're probably better off with her staying away, but this is more like she's, helping citizens and denizens, and that's what we're getting a lot more of than anything else. So, I don't know. I'm just seeing where it goes. But, like I said, Mutant Nation I need to catch up on. It's only on issue 2. I think I technically haven't read issue 3 yet. I need to get both of them down. But it's the mainline series where my attention is most drawn. And so, that's where I'm at. Unfortunately, my best of segment is turning into worst of. I did pick up Deadpool. The new, his daughter is Deadpool. We'll talk about it next time. I got to give those a thorough read. Not liking it so far. I think that says enough right there. Enough said, as Stan Lee would put it. And then Spectacular Spider-Man. So, I have quickly discovered that book's way more tolerable when Humberto Ramos is working on the art. The fill-in guy is not terrible, but I'm not exactly buying the book for his art. And so, just purely off of Greg Weisman's story, oh my god, I can't stand these characters. I don't give a shit about any of these extra characters that are Peter and Miles' pals at the coffee shop. I've already complained on the site, but I don't like this whole idea of, like, Peter and Miles are buddies. It's like, dude, Peter Parker is a grown-ass man. Miles is a little boy. It's like, I'm sorry, I get he's in high school, but he's a kid. A grown-ass man isn't just going to hang out with a kid. It's like, I have middle school students. It's like, I would not hang out with any of them. Now, when I see them, if I'm driving away from work, I'll wave at them. I'll say hi to them as I'm passing them by. But it's like, they're children, you know, and I'm an adult, and it's inappropriate, I feel, for me to be like all up in their life. But this is what Peter's doing with Miles. He's like just running around with him. We hang out all the time. It's like, bro, you're in your 30s. And, you know, maybe late 20s. But at this point in Marvel continuity, I assume Peter's probably in his early 30s. And then Miles is like 16, 17, something like that. So I just think it's stupid. So from that point, it's a problem. But then they have this crew at I think it's the Coffee Bean or whatever it is, the roast. I don't care enough to check. But it's the coffee shop at ESU, Empire State University. And I don't like any of these people. Like, they're all just like these super generic cardboard cutout people that, again, just reek of modern day. And they're all going through these therapy sessions. I'm just like, this is stupid. Like, this is just awful. So I don't know how long for this world Spectacular Spider-Man is, but it ain't impressing so far. The first arc wasn't much better either. It was the Arcadium, and it was Arcade and Mentalo, I think, working with Hammerhead, and it was just a mess. Next podcast, maybe I'll talk about it. But my reviews are out there too. So anyway, I think I've talked enough. I'm kind of torn, on how long the show should be. I mean, it's just me sitting and yakking. And I know I like long podcasts. I will sit and I don't care if something's like 3 hours long. I'm down. 3 hours, 4 hours, whatever. But some of you might not feel the same way. We'll find out. I'm just going to kind of do what I want. Never forget, folks, I'm not getting paid for this. So this is just me entertaining myself at 2 a.m. as I record, having fun. But anyway, I guess that's about it. So you all have a happy Thanksgiving. Be careful out there. Look out for drunken weirdos on the road, especially if you're here in the Bay. Have fun with your families. And, again, my mom, she just recently passed away. This is the first Thanksgiving in my life where she won't be there. So I guess I would say don't take your family for granted. If you're thinking it's a better idea to ignore your mother because she voted the wrong way, that's probably not the brightest idea. I say just go enjoy Thanksgiving dinner with them. All right, you guys, take care. Till next time.